the cigar as you see it here and what you guys are selling and photographing, by the time it gets here, the tobacco was planted at least 2.5 years ago. So how we start from a seed and get to this, and not just the time, 300 people have probably touched the components of this. And that's kind of the handmade amazingness of it, but also the kind of the art and time and craft that goes into preparing the tobacco to get here. So I know a lot of times we are the undisputed best place to buy a cigar, certainly price-wise. But it always amazes me when people say, man, cigars cost a lot. I think after today, when you understand what goes into it, it's amazing that they cost what they do and not, so much more. So in the beginning, let's start at kind of the top, which is the first 4 weeks of the plant's life cycle, really starts with the seeds. And a lot of this will probably start to sound familiar if you guys have done any of your own gardening or are kind of amateur botany enthusiasts. But a lot of what goes on, even planting any crop here or anywhere in the world, is very similar to how tobacco is grown. Tobacco itself is actually classified as a weed. It grows incredibly quickly, and it's kind of has a life of its own on how the seeds disperse. So even when you're driving around tobacco country in Nicaragua and Honduras, you'll see kind of a beautiful farm, and then even across the street you'll see these kind of weird rogue tobacco plants just growing anywhere that they find a little niche to grab onto. But the seed itself is literally the size of a pinpoint. Just what's in that guy's hand could plant 10 acres of tobacco. And so we're working with things that are very microscopic. And each seed, there's 4 basic seed types. You have your Indonesian variety, which includes Sumatra, Cameroon, and they're all variations of Sumatra seeds, because that's where the seed actually was first grown, was in Indonesia. You have your Connecticut seeds, which obviously were first grown in Connecticut. You have your Habano seeds, which all have a history and legacy from Cuba. And then you also have what I call this 4th seed bucket, which is kind of a more exotic group of tobaccos that are grown in different places that technically started in Cuba but have kind of morphed out into their own. And those are things like that you may have heard of, like Matafina and Arapiraca and San Andres. They're these kind of more boutique, exotic tobaccos. But the Connecticut, the Sumatra, and the Habano are all kind of your key 3 seed groups. If you're reading the descriptions, you've talked to customers, you've probably heard people say Sumatra, Ecuador, or Connecticut from Honduras, or Connecticut. The first word there is always the seed varietal, and the second word is the country where it's grown. So Connecticut seeds, for example, are grown in Connecticut, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Honduras, all the same seeds, but depending on where they're grown, they kind of have a different profile. Some of the characteristics are all the same in terms of kind of how the leaf looks, maybe its size, but flavor-wise, those different climates and terroirs will give a different flavor experience to the customer. Similarly, you have Sumatra when it's grown in Indonesia. We have various names for that, Java and Basuki, different things. When it's grown in Ecuador, night and day difference. It's spicy, it's strong, it's full of nicotine. When you grow it in Indonesia, it's less nicotine. So my point is when you start talking about seeds and countries, you'll start to see things like Habano, Ecuador, Sumatra, Ecuador. Seed variety, country where it's grown. So seeds first go into the greenhouse. Looks like your standard greenhouse you guys probably see around here. Those little black plastic trays that you buy your geraniums or whatever, that's the same stuff we're working with. We're working with a nutrient-rich type of kind of potting soil that has low density, because what we're trying to do when we first plant those seeds is allow the roots to start to take form. So it's a very kind of nice loose soil. And we'll put 6 seeds in each of these little 1 inch by 1 inch squares or 1 inch diameter holes and begin the watering process. they'll be in the greenhouse and in the trays for about 4 weeks. That's the first 4 weeks of the tobacco's life. And during that time, by hand, mind you, we have people that are going to go through throughout the process, certainly about once a week, and start to see which of those 6 seeds are taking. It's kind of an addition by subtraction process. We're not going to grab the best one. We're going to start by looking at which ones are struggling. Simply just remove those. By the end of the 4 weeks, by week 3, we may have 2 competing plants in the same tray. And towards that last week, we will have decided which one gets to survive on its own.